Jenny Hobbs was born in Durban on the day of the Hindenburg disaster in 1937. Despite this unpropitious beginning, she has had a happy and productive life as a journalist turned novelist, with diversions into humor along the way. She's written 4 novels and 4 works of non-fiction, and also is the literary director of the Franschhoek Literary Festival.
That's it, Franschhoek with 2 H's.
And Franschhoek is located about an hour's drive outside of Cape Town. Welcome to the Bibliophile.
Thank you.
How do you do this? How did it start? And, how does one go about setting one of these things up?
Okay, it started with an idea by Christopher Hope.
The novelist?
The novelist. He was a South African who now lives in France. We met and he mentioned the idea and I said, well, how about Franschhoek? And that's how it began. With the strong support of local tourism, we're a tourist village. We have a wonderful spread of guest houses and very supportive local community. We also had, in the first festival, a donor who almost came out of the woodwork and offered us enough to get going. And we had 6 volunteers on a committee.
And enough to get going is about $25,000 US.
Yes, that's about that.
Okay.
It's not a lot, but the voluntary help, and most of us worked really hard for months. Voluntary help, the good connections we had with local writers and journalists, and the very great support of the guest houses who gave us donated accommodation.
Okay.
We just got up and running.
Quickly.
Quite quickly. It took about 8 months. Altogether, nearly a year, but 8 months of solid work.
So now, what does that solid work, what did that entail specifically?
Well, it was contacting writers, emails, endless emails. It was arranging venues. It was finding venues. It was all the sort of nitty-gritty stuff. Organising who was going to stay where, organising how to get them here. It took a lot of work. We had good connections with publishers and writers. We pride ourselves on being independent in that we are not dictated to by anyone who to ask. And we
other
try
than your
to
donor,
ask,
of course.
other than occasional requests by the donor. We try to get a good spread of writers from the more experienced to first-time writers across the South African literary spectrum. We generally don't go for the serious academic tomes. We go for novelists, biographers. Biographers are very popular.
Yeah.
And just first-time writers. Oral poetry too. We have a number of poets. And we just got going. We got stuck in and it worked. The first festival, we didn't know how many people would come. We had 5 venues then, 3 of them very small, 2 larger. And sold about, 2/3 of the tickets. And we were thrilled by that. And then we got very good publicity. Thanks
publicity, from Cape Town media, for example?
South African media
just
in
general?
Yeah.
Okay.
We attracted interest, I think, from the beginning. We're the mainly English-speaking festival.
As opposed to Afrikaans?
As opposed to the many Afrikaans writers' festivals. Afrikaans community is extremely supportive of its writers. Far more so than the English.
And yet you don't really hear much about, I guess because I'm from an English-speaking country.
That's right. One of our criteria now, and we do ask Afrikaans writers, a few Afrikaans writers each time, one of our criteria being that they should be translated into English. Mm-hmm. And in that way we can introduce newer Afrikaans writers to an English-speaking public.
But you're the only significant writers' festival in South Africa.
Well, no, I can't say that. There's Time of the Writers in Durban, which is a much more structured festival, which is attached to the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
Okay.
And it's a really much bigger, more formal festival.
Okay.
And then there's the Cape Town Book Fair.
Yes, which is
more a trade fair.
Yeah, exactly.
But they do have a number of writer interviews.
Okay.
I think we work because we're small, we're intimate, we're informal, and we encourage audience participation.
How do you
do that? So we
have
discussions. We have discussions in the smaller venues, and the audience is encouraged to ask questions.
Okay.
And state, I really quiz the writers sometimes, and that is good.
And they can do that because the intimate setting, and they
Exactly.
can probably get a lot more out of this type of writers' festival than you might at a much larger event.
Well, I think so, and something else we've learned, and that is to use chair people who are really very well read and also informal and used to interviewing writers, broadcasters, not really publishers and not really critics. They don't work so well, but the broadcasters who are used to doing writer interviews and getting the most out of writers works extremely well. So we're learning in the three, up to now, the two festivals we've had and the third upcoming, we're learning what works best, and that is to get experienced interviewers to do the events and to keep them informal and to have laughter and light moments, and it's not deadly serious. And in fact, we do discourage readings. We don't think readings are very productive. We think discussions are better. So if they're readings, they're quite short, and we don't have long speeches either. We keep things short, snappy and interesting.
I guess part of that might involve educating the public or informing the public early on in the game who's coming this year and what books you might want to read so that you can quiz the authors.
Absolutely, and we get our programs out 3 months before the event, and they are our publicity. We now have a paid publicist, and from the first year we had a paid publicist. We have a new one this year, and they send out regular press releases, and they contact all the local book people in the country and the book editors and so on. So publicity is crucial to this. Publicity and local support, and a lot of voluntary effort. And now we're getting bigger, we have to have a few more paid people, but basically it's run on a lot of goodwill and a lot of participation. We try to get across the board selection of South African writers. We get new ones, more experienced ones.
Focusing in on advice to people who may be considering doing something like this for their communities. You've talked about a great deal of goodwill, getting like-minded people together, working together.
Passionate people.
What else do you have to do?
Well, of course, our other focus is to raise the culture of reading, encourage reading in the Valley, in our local community, which has suffered terribly from apartheid education. So reading is not a big thing in the local community. In the underprivileged schools, there are children who come out of school virtually illiterate. We have got to get our children reading. And so our other focus in this festival is to raise funds to put books into creches and schools, and ultimately to, we hope one day, build a new community library that will serve the whole community. We were lucky in that we were donated a children's container book library by Exclusive Books, which is our big book chain in South Africa. And that is attracting a lot of kids, where they can read mother tongue books. There are 3 languages in our valley, predominantly, Afrikaans, English, and isiXhosa. And so,
sorry, the pronunciation of the last one?
isiXhosa.
isiXhosa?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very important for little kids to have books in their mother tongues. And so that's an excitement for us. We have got books into the community, and we're very pleased about that. And we think kids are beginning to get excited about reading. Not teenagers, perhaps.
No,
that's
none
the
of them
difficult
are.
one.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, there's so much competition, you know.
But it's a matter of getting stuck in, of caring about books, of perhaps knowing some writers and getting to know more writers.
Knowing that, in other words, there may be some personal connections that you take advantage of to get certain writers here.
Well, James, one of the other troika now, which is central to the festival, is a book editor. And so James Woodhouse, he is an editor who edits a lot of young black writers' work. So he is very much in contact with young and upcoming writers. He's about to take a job with Penguin, so he will continue to be
looking
in touch and looking and knowing about younger writers. And that's important to us, is to reach the new writers. After the second year, which we were very lucky to have the Commonwealth Writers' Prize
Yeah, how did you get so they actually announced that here.
Yes, they did.
How on earth did you get that?
Well, I'll tell you how we got that. We had two finalists, African finalists. Sean Johnson, who's Cape Town, a novelist, was the Africa first novelist finalist, and Khabeba Badaroon, who's a poet. Both of them went to the Commonwealth Writers' Festival in Jamaica in 2007. And they got friendly with the Commonwealth people, and they told them about the Franschhoek Writers' Festival. And James Woodhouse got in touch with them, via Sean, via Khabeba, there was a connection. And the Commonwealth people were looking for a festival in South Africa, which they had chosen as their next continent, because they go in different parts of the Commonwealth.
Right.
And after 6 months of negotiation with our Department of Arts and Culture, we landed the final, and it was thrilling, because we had 6 writers, so more than that. I think it was 7 writers from different parts of the Commonwealth, Australia.
So in other words, this sort of connection brought in a good chunk of who's going to participate in that year's festival.
That's right. Not only the writers, but the judges too. So that was hugely enriching for us.
Right. And the winner was?
And the winner was Lawrence Hill
from Canada.
A Book of Negroes. And what a nice guy. What a really super chap. That again gave us a bit of standing, so now we're taken really much more seriously. In the beginning, I think publishers were quite dismissive of this little upstart festival because
numbers weren't impressive, or
before we got going, they were virtually saying, "Well, who are you?" I mean, they knew who we were, but they were saying, "Well, I'm not sure if we can support you. Our margins are very small. We don't have money to spend, etc., etc." Now, publishers are much more supportive. They will fly writers down for us.
So one of the pieces of advice then is to land some big prize that wants to announce their winner at your festival.
Well, I think it was after the first festival, even before we got the Commonwealth, suddenly the publishers realised that the public was interested, and the readers started flocking here. Now,
by flocking, what do you mean? Like what kind of numbers?
Well, in the first year we had about 1,500 people. And that's not bad, because there's no public transport here. People have to drive here. In the second year, we got about 2,300. It began to pick up.
And it's a 3-day festival, right?
Yes, it's a 3-day festival. Those are the sold tickets. And this year, the bookings are heavier than before. And we expect to be pretty well, certainly in the smaller venues, booked out.
Great.
And it's fun to come here. It's a village where you can walk around.
It's spectacular. The drive here.
Spectacular.
The most spectacular scenery in the world.
The most beautiful valley. It is the most beautiful valley. It has one.
But that doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
We have about 35 restaurants in the village.
And it's coming up too, isn't it?
It's coming up.
The dates are?
Yes, 15th to 17th of May.
Right, okay.
And it's a village, it's a festival where you can walk around. You park your car and you just stroll around. You can go into the bookshops. There are 3 local bookshops, 2 second-hand. One's really great fun, really out of a movie.
And we'll take photographs of that.
Yeah, and it's a place where you can come and listen to interesting small groups of writers.
I'm speaking with Jenny Hobbs, who is the literary director of the Franschhoek Literary Festival. You mentioned the benefits of having people who work for the festival knowing what's going on in the publishing business, as well as being aware of who's up and coming. So who is up and coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick out anybody particularly.
There's no one that really blows your
blows our socks off. Well, we hear, and we haven't met her yet. We hear that there's a Zimbabwean writer called Patina Gappa, who is about to be published by Faber, and they are extremely excited about her writing. She works in Geneva. She's a lawyer. But she is ex-Zimbabwean. We have, of course, a number of really good Zimbabwean writers. Alexandra Fuller is also coming to the festival this year. She lives in Wyoming. Unfortunately, Zimbabweans are very thinly spread around the world.
Yeah, well, they're not. A lot of them have fled.
Yeah, they fled, and we hope, as the years approach, to attract more African writers, but from further north in Africa. The problem being that most of the high-level African writers live elsewhere. They live in America or the UK.
Yeah, they're working at big name universities,
we can't afford big airfares. We don't have a tame airline that'll fly people in. So, our funding is limited to one overseas writer, unless the publisher flies them in. And Faber are flying Patina in, so they must be pretty excited about her. She sounds great from her emails.
Speaking of African writers, what percentage of the audience is made up of black people?
Far too low a percentage. We're trying very hard to attract the community, and we have specific community events like the poetry competition, like a spelling bee for kids, like a cabaret that is put on by local young people. We try very hard to attract, and we're going to have a nice event in that we are having at the poetry competition prize winners event. We are having isiZulu and isiXhosa poems read by two people who are involved with collections, as well as Afrikaans and English. So that's a quadrilingual event.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, you're trying to attract a new audience, black and coloured and
students.
white.
We try hard to bring students.
Right. So you're trying to do that, and you're also part of the way that you're doing that is by inviting black and coloured and white and Afrikaan
right across the board
writers to your and so in terms of sort of the percentage, if you want to look at that, but you've got
sort of half and half.
So it's half white, half sort of indigenous, or
last year it was about half and half. This year it is unfortunately less sort of up and coming writers. We have tried very hard to attract certain writers. We've tried twice to get Chimamanda Adichie here, but she's never available. She's a Nigerian writer. Have you read her books?
No.
The Purple Hibiscus, Half of a Yellow Sun. Very hot Nigerian writer. Very good, especially Purple Hibiscus. We did have two Ghanaian writers, Commonwealth writers last year, which was super. Yeah.
Any closing words of advice to the
Wanna Start a Festival?
Wanna Start a Festival listener?
I'm thinking of the Kevin Costner movie. What was the one about the baseball field?
Oh yeah, if you
build it and they'll come.
Right.
Yeah. And I think if you just get stuck in and start with a lot of passion, a good donor, and
as you say, having
and good connections.
Good connections, and also the fact is that you've got all of these this accommodation that's there, and that's
you've got the strong support of the community, of the tourist board. If you have a few of those factors, preferably all of them, go for it.
Great. Well, congratulations on going for it and getting it.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Jenny Hobbs, who is an author in her own right, a novelist, and also the literary director of the Franschhoek Literary Festival in South Africa.
Thank you.